Welcome to another edition of Shorts and Shells, in which our senior editor Eric Edholm gives some of his observations from Sunday's game. And in Week 11, Eric, we had a couple home teams that really laid an egg, were able to rally and come back and win. Houston and Atlanta, two of the best teams in the league, top two in our power rankings, really struggled against some bad teams at home. The Texans survive against the Jaguars. The Falcons hang on to beat the Cardinals. When you look at those two games, and the fact they played so poorly at home, what's kind of your reaction to those kind of performances?
Well, there's two ways to look at it. You could say, okay, they staked these teams these leads, and then they came back and played their best football in the fourth quarter. Julio Jones was out, and the Texans were kind of beaten up a little bit by the Jaguars. More, physical football than they probably expected to receive from a team that hadn't been playing well recently. But, you can look at it and say they rally, but I look at it and say they're staking bad teams' leads, and it's a bad precedent to set. The Giants were doing that at home earlier in the season. We also saw the Cowboys giving the Browns a 13-0 lead in their game. It's this kind of behavior that I don't think portends very well for the playoffs. I don't think you look at these teams all of a sudden and say they've got, they're built to last. They've got the chance to be a great team. Good teams simply don't do this kind of stuff.
And there's not many good teams in the NFL, if that's our definition either, because we've seen very few teams be able to just roll over opponents like the Packers did to start the season last year.
I think if you take that a step farther, we very well could see, kind of like we saw with the Arizona Cardinals a couple years ago when they made the Super Bowl, a team that's 9-7 going into the playoffs. It gets hot. The Giants last year, that sort of thing. I think you have to be prepared for a team like that to come out of nowhere, so to speak, and get to the Super Bowl this year, because like you said, there are so few dominant teams this season.
On the other side of those teams not playing well is a couple teams that had chances at those upsets, really struggled on fourth down and made some interesting calls that maybe cost them. You look at Jacksonville against Houston in overtime, their fourth down call. Yep. Cleveland against Dallas, the 4th-and-1 fade from the goal line. And Carolina, Ron Rivera already on the hot seat. An interesting fourth down call there. What about those kind of situations, and what does it say about those head coaches making those calls?
Well, with owners wielding more power now, it seems, after the CBA victory, it looks like they've gotten the better end of that. It seems like there's going to be a lot of head coaching changes, a lot of GM changes this offseason. The owners feel like they're empowered to make these moves after a year or two. That's why guys like Mike Mularkey could be in trouble, like Ron Rivera in Carolina, like Cleveland with the new ownership there. So, when you see very little trending upwards towards the end of the season, and you see these failed decisions in key parts of the game, you really think that these kind of things could cost their team. Rivera, to me, was the least excusable, because he faced that very same situation in Week 4, 4th-and-1 on the opponent's side of the field. You got to run the football. You've got a huge backfield. Most CEOs don't make as much as those guys. Run it. They don't. They give it back to Josh Freeman. He beats them. Jacksonville, the 4th-and-10. I guess you could say the defense couldn't hold them again, but still very questionable, no doubt.
Yeah, to me, the biggest bonehead call was the 4th-and-goal fade pattern from Brandon Weed, and just how often does that play work? And they're running a 4th-and-goal right there, knocking on the doorstep. But I do want to ask you back to that Jacksonville one again, because this is a thing we've seen before in the new overtime. How do teams handle these situations when you have the fourth down in enemy territory in this overtime? You don't want to give it back to your team, but you want to get your chance to score. I mean, heck, maybe Jacksonville should have played for a tie at that point to be in it with Houston. I mean, what goes through a coach's head in these new rules, how to handle the situation?
Yet another example, and I think it's true in the Carolina situation. Marty Hurney gets fired. It's a matter of the front office and the coaching staff not being in sync. Gene Smith goes out and drafts a punter in the 3rd round, and yet they don't want to use the guy. That's when you pin the opponent back at the 1-yard line. They've been shutting down the run. Yeah, I know Matt Schaub almost set the record for most passing yards, but give your defense a chance in that situation and don't make the boneheaded decision. 4th-and-10, even with Chad Henne playing pretty well.
And those fans probably really excited to get potential upset victories, and they have to struggle and see their teams lose because of poor decision-making. You never want to see that.
Well, you could root for draft picks at this point, right?
Exactly, or that you could root for your team to draft a punter again.
That's right.
Well, a lot of things going on in those games, and a lot of craziness happened in Week 11. And to check out all of Eric's observations, be sure to read his Shorts and Shells column at our website, profootballweekly.com.